You fought hard to become someone new. But let me ask you something, and answer it honestly. Are you reinforcing that version every day? Or are you just hoping it lasts? Because here's the hard truth. The transformation doesn't hold unless you hold it. You can't just break the old cycle once. You have to break it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. In this video, I'll show you exactly why most people quietly slide back into who they used to be, even after they've made massive progress. You'll learn what weakens the new identity, how to stop subtle self-betrayals, and what it really takes to make your growth permanent. And by the end, you'll have a strategy to protect what you've built before life pulls you back without warning. Because nobody talks about this. They talk about change, about progress, about becoming your best self. But no one teaches you how to stay that person, how to keep showing up when the fire's gone, when the excitement wears off, when the world stops clapping for your effort. That's where people lose it, not in the breakdown, but in the days after the breakthrough. You've probably been there. You made a shift. You felt the clarity. You told yourself, this time, it's different. And for a while, it was. You woke up earlier. You made better decisions. You stopped negotiating with your old habits. But then, life got heavy. You got distracted. The pressure came back. And slowly, almost invisibly, the new version of you started to dissolve. Not all at once, but in the little things. You stopped journaling. You skipped the morning routine. You let the same excuses back in. And before you knew it, you were living like the old you again, even if you still believed in the new one. Here's why that happens. Change isn't permanent. Identity isn't fixed. Discipline doesn't stick by default. Everything you've built has to be reinforced daily, because the world will always offer you a reason to slip back. Comfort, distraction, fatigue, chaos. And if you don't have a structure to protect your new self, you'll wake up one day wondering where that version went. You'll say things like, I don't know what happened. I was doing so well. I just lost momentum. No, you didn't lose momentum. You stopped reinforcing it. You got casual. You got comfortable. You thought the change would hold itself, and it doesn't. Let me make this clear. You don't become unstoppable because you changed once. You become unstoppable because you wake up every day and choose not to slip back. Because you refuse to let your mind drift. Because you don't let your body lead the schedule. Because you don't give the old self even 1 inch of space. This is where most people fail, and this is where you can win. Because if you're here, still listening, still watching, still hungry to protect what you've built, then this video is for you. We're going to walk through the real reason why the new self fades. We'll expose the tiny compromises that weaken your transformation. We'll rebuild your daily structure so it actually supports your identity, not just your to-do list. And we'll lock in a mindset that keeps you from ever becoming available again for the person you used to be. But more than that, I'm going to show you how to make your growth unshakable. Because you didn't fight to become someone new just to fall back in the dark when no one's watching. You didn't come this far to relive the same chapters. You didn't suffer and sacrifice and stretch your identity just to lose it in silence. This time, you protect it. You reinforce it. You lead it. And if you stay with me until the end of this video, I'll walk you through a series of practical steps, no fluff, that will help you lock into the new identity and live like it's non-negotiable. Because that's the difference between those who transform once and those who never go back again. Let's begin. It never feels like the fall at first. It starts small. You wake up 10 minutes later than usual. You say, it's fine. I've been consistent all week. You skip the journal. You tell yourself you'll come back to it later. You eat something you said you'd cut, just this once. You reply to a message before your morning routine. One distraction becomes 5. And just like that, the version of you that was growing, slowly, quietly, intentionally, starts to fade. But it doesn't look like failure. It looks like life. That's the danger. Because most people don't fall back into their old selves through a dramatic breakdown. They fall back through comfort, through convenience, through a slow drift. And they don't even notice it until it's too late. Here's what you need to understand. Every single day, you're reinforcing something. You're either reinforcing your new self or your old self. You're either backing up your identity with action or you're making quiet exceptions that slowly erase it. There is no neutral zone, no pause on growth, no safe space where your new self can coast and still hold. Your identity is like a muscle. If you don't work it, it weakens. And once it weakens, the old patterns move back and without resistance. This is how it happens. At first, you tell yourself, I deserve a break. Then, it's just a bad week. Then, I'll get back on track next month. And before you know it, you're not just slipping, you're living like the version you swore you'd outgrow. It's subtle, it's sneaky, and it's real. So here's the new frame. If you don't reinforce your new self, you'll lose it. And this isn't fear-based. It's clarity-based. Because real growth isn't just about who you become. It's about what you maintain, what you protect, what you don't let go of, no matter how tired or distracted or overwhelmed you feel. And the only way to protect it is by making your new self visible every single day. That means showing up with discipline. It means honoring the decisions that brought you here. It means refusing to negotiate with the voices that tell you it's okay to take a day off from being who you said you'd be. Let me say that again. You don't take a day off from your identity. Because if you do, even for a day, you're opening the door to the part of you that's been waiting for permission to come back. You know that version. The one that cuts corners. The one that waits until it's urgent. The one that builds in short sprints, then collapses for weeks. That version of you doesn't need much. Just a crack in your focus. Just one skipped standard. Just a single moment of I'll do it later. That's how it starts. That's how it always starts. So let's flip the script. Let's stop waiting for a collapse to remind you what you're risking. Let's start building daily proof that you're no longer available for your old self. Here's how. Start with micro commitments. Not giant goals. Not overwhelming routines. 1 or 2 non-negotiables. Anchor points in your day that say, this is who I am now. When you do them, your brain registers consistency. And consistency is the language of identity. Track proof, not perfection. Keep a visible log of what you're reinforcing. Not as punishment, but as evidence. I showed up today. I led myself through discomfort. I made one aligned decision. That's reinforcement. That's cementing. Interrupt the drift, fast. The moment you notice the slide, stop. Don't wait until next week. 1 day of drift is recovery. 3 days is denial. A week is identity loss. This is where most people fail. They don't feel the drift because they're only measuring collapse. They're only tracking breakdowns. So they miss the 1,000 small compromises that came first. But not you. You're not here to collapse quietly. You're here to lead yourself with awareness, and that means catching it early. Reinforcing your new self doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be daily. It's in how you wake up, how you speak to yourself, what you allow in your space, what you repeat, even when no one is watching. Because all of those choices are telling your nervous system, this is real. This is who I am now. We're not going back. And yes, it gets boring sometimes. It gets heavy. It feels invisible. But let me remind you of something. You didn't start this journey to impress people. You started it because you were done living a life that didn't feel like yours. So don't slip now. Don't look away. Don't let comfort trick you into abandoning what you worked so hard to build. Reinforce it. Relentlessly. Ruthlessly. Quietly. Daily. And if you're hearing this and realizing how easy it is to drift, if this is hitting you in the chest because you've been slipping without even seeing it, then subscribe now. Not for this channel. For yourself. To remind yourself that this isn't optional anymore. You're not playing with potential. You're protecting identity. And that's a standard worth reinforcing every single day. In the next step, we'll break down exactly why identity slips when structure fades, and how to rebuild a daily rhythm that holds strong, even when your emotions don't. Let's lock it in. You can feel inspired. You can have a breakthrough. You can even have a full week of perfect behavior. But if you don't reinforce that change through structure, it won't last. And it's not because you're weak. It's because you're human. Humans don't drift into excellence. We don't evolve on accident. And we definitely don't maintain progress by emotion alone. If you want to protect the new self you've created, you need to understand one thing. Your identity is only as strong as your structure. That structure doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be consistent, and it has to be yours. Because when you remove the structure that supported your change, the change begins to rot from the inside out. You might still look like the new you, say the right things, post the same messages, but inside, the integrity is slipping. And eventually, your actions follow. Let me break it down clearly. Change happens in a moment. Reinforcement happens through rhythm. And rhythm doesn't just appear, it's built. If you don't build that rhythm, your mind and body will default to what's easy. And what's easy is what's familiar. And what's familiar is your old self. This is why people relapse. Not just in addictions, but in mindsets, in disciplines, in standards. Because the high of transformation fades, and when it does, structure is the only thing that keeps you grounded. Let's get practical. You already know what happens when you live without structure. You wake up later. You forget your non-negotiables. You start reacting instead of leading. You drift into urgency, distraction, obligation. You tell yourself, I'll get back on track. But without a structure, there is no track. It's just chaos in a loop. So you end up chasing clarity every morning instead of reinforcing it. This is what weakens identity, not failure, but inconsistency. And inconsistency isn't always loud. Sometimes it's subtle. It hides behind busyness, behind good intentions, behind temporary progress. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not living like the person you said you'd become. You're imitating them. So let's fix that. Here's the rule. If it's not structured, it's optional. If it's optional, it's negotiable. And if it's negotiable, it won't survive your bad days. You don't need more motivation. You need rhythm. Because rhythm removes decision fatigue. It gives your day a spine. It eliminates negotiation. It says, this is what I do, no matter how I feel. And that's how real identity forms. So how do you build that rhythm? Start by defining your identity anchors. 3 simple questions. What does the new me do every morning without fail? It might be reflection, movement, focus. Choose it. Make it non-negotiable. What is one standard I refuse to let slip, no matter how chaotic the day gets? Could be hydration. Could be your tone of voice. Could be keeping a promise. One thing, every day, no matter what. What environment supports my new self? And how do I protect it? Who are you around? What do you consume? What boundaries need to be in place so you don't drift? Answer those honestly and write them down. Because when identity lives only in your head, it's fragile. When it lives in your structure, it's solid. Now, once that's in place, your job is to repeat. Every single day. Even when it's boring. Even when it's hard. Especially when no one is watching. Because repetition isn't a lack of progress. It's the proof that progress is holding. The people who never slip back don't have more energy than you. They just have structure. They live inside systems that reinforce the person they decided to become. They don't rely on how they feel. They rely on what they've built. And when that structure is tested by fatigue, emotion, distractions, it holds. Because they've rehearsed it over and over until it's not just something they do. It's who they are. This is what you're building now. Not a checklist, not a streak. A life that supports your new identity every single day. So stop saying you'll try harder. Start asking, what system can I build to make this who I am? Because your future doesn't need more intensity. It needs more integrity. And integrity isn't how hard you push. It's how consistently you hold. And yes, there will be resistance. Life will pull at you. You'll wake up tired. You'll want to delay. But those are the moments where structure saves you. Because you won't have to think. You won't have to search for willpower. You'll just follow through, because it's who you are now. So if you're tired of falling back, tired of waking up and feeling like the momentum is gone, don't fight harder. Build smarter. In the next step, we'll break down the small, daily choices that either reinforce your new self or erode it silently, and how to catch yourself before the slide even begins. You're not going backward. You're not stuck. You just need a structure that holds. Let's build it. You don't lose yourself in one day. You lose yourself in the tiny decisions you never question. And by the time you realize what happened, the damage is already done. It doesn't start with collapse. It starts with negotiation. Small ones. Ones that seem harmless. Ones you don't even count as failure. Like hitting snooze, just today. Like skipping your journal. You'll get to it later. Like grabbing your phone first thing, just for 5 minutes. Like telling yourself, I deserve this, when you know it violates your own standard. Each of these moments on their own doesn't feel dangerous. They feel justified, normal, human, and they are. But here's what you have to face. Those micro decisions are steering the wheel. They're not random, they're directional. And the direction they're pointing to is backward. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Every time you let a standard slide, and you don't correct it, you reinforce the old self just a little more. Not just in behavior, in identity. Because identity isn't built in your head. It's built in evidence. Daily, tangible, repetitive evidence. So when you say you're becoming disciplined, but you skip the hard thing when it's inconvenient, your mind doesn't register the words. It registers the action. And the action says, this is who I still am. Even worse, you start to believe you're lying to yourself. And once that belief creeps in, it poisons your momentum from the inside. You still show up, but now it feels forced, heavy, disconnected. You're doing the work, but not identifying with it. And that's how the slide begins. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped believing that you're the person you were trying to become. Let's get even more real. One skipped commitment might not ruin you, but your response to that skip, that determines everything. You either course correct and reinforce your standard, or you rationalize and reinforce your drift. And most people, without realizing it, choose the second one. Why? Because correcting yourself requires presence. It requires humility. It requires leadership. It's so much easier to say, I'll do better tomorrow. Or worse, to tell yourself that you're still doing okay, even when you know you're sliding. But you're not here for okay. You're not building a life that just survives. You're here for ownership, for integrity, for strength you don't have to fake. So here's what you need to do. Step 1, track your micro decisions. Not obsessively, just enough to see the patterns. What choices keep showing up in your day that either weaken you or reinforce you? What's your default excuse? What moment do you keep negotiating? Awareness is 80% of the battle. Because once you see it, clearly, honestly, you can interrupt it. Step 2, pre-decide your response. You don't wait until you're tired to decide if you'll follow through. You decide before the resistance even comes. If I feel this, I'll do that. If I forget this, I'll correct it this way. That kind of clarity removes wiggle room. And wiggle room is where the old you hides. Step 3, reaffirm your identity with behavior, not words. Stop trying to convince yourself with affirmations if your actions don't match. Start acting like the person you say you are, even if it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Because the more often you act in alignment, even when it costs you, the louder that new identity becomes. And one day, you wake up, and it's no longer a costume. It's who you are. That's the game. That's how it works. And that's why most people never make it. Because they want the results. They even do the big things. But they lose the battle in the margins, in the small choices. And wonder why it all slips away. Not you. Not this time. Because you're going to pay attention to the in-between. You're going to lead yourself in the quiet moments. You're going to reinforce the new self every time the old one tries to bargain. That's how it's done. And if this is hitting you, if you're starting to recognize the exact moments where you've been giving yourself away without realizing it, drop a comment below and name it. Call it out. Because awareness without language disappears fast. But when you speak it, even anonymously, you pull it into the light. And that's where it starts to lose its grip. Tell me, what's the one micro decision you need to stop negotiating? Let's be clear. You're not broken. You're not lost. You're just one decision away from locking back into alignment. And in the next step, I'll show you how to rebuild a daily reinforcement ritual, one that doesn't rely on motivation, and that keeps you anchored when everything around you tries to pull you off course. Let's turn clarity into action. It's not enough to know who you want to become. You have to build the conditions that make it harder to be anyone else. That's what reinforcement is. Not effort, not hype, not motivation, but the structure that protects your identity, even on your worst days. And if you're serious about not falling back, then you need to stop leaving your new self unprotected. Let's build a daily reinforcement ritual, not one that overwhelms you, but one that holds you. Because when life gets loud, you need anchors. Not ideas, not good intentions. Anchors. Here's what that looks like. Step 1. Reinforce with repetition, not reaction. Stop waiting until you feel off track to correct yourself. Start your day with preemptive identity work. This means repeating your standards out loud, writing them, reading them before the day begins. Why? Because repetition isn't redundancy, it's training. You're training your nervous system, your thoughts, your emotional patterns to follow one voice, yours. The voice of the version you decided to become. It's not the repetition that gets boring, it's the absence of meaning behind it. So don't just say it. Feel it. Mean it. Stand behind it. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is how I show up, no matter what's happening around me. You say it until it's not just a line. It's a standard. Step 2. Reinforce through movement, not stagnation. Your body needs to experience leadership. So every day, move it. Not for aesthetics, not for goals, but as a statement. I am not passive. I lead. It doesn't have to be a long workout. It can be a walk, a stretch, a round of breathing. Whatever reminds your body that it answers to your decisions, not to your feelings. This matters, because if your body stays passive, so will your mind. And that's the first step back to autopilot. Step 3. Reinforce through environment, not resistance. Look around. Is your space built to support the person you're becoming? Are the reminders visible? Are the distractions removed? Are the people you're around helping you remember your direction, or helping you forget? You don't have to control everything, but you must control what you allow to stay. Build an environment that reflects your identity, not your impulses. Leave your journal visible. Write your standards on your wall. Keep your phone out of reach in the morning. Curate your input. Music, content, conversations. These aren't rules. They're reinforcements. Because every input is either pulling you forward or dragging you back. Step 4. Reinforce with language, not loopholes. The words you use matter. Stop softening your discipline with justifications like, I'm just tired. It's been a rough day. I'll start strong again tomorrow. Start using language that calls you up, not lets you off. I'm tired, but I'm still capable. I'm not negotiating today. This version of me leads even when it's inconvenient. Talk like someone who believes in their direction. Because identity follows language, especially when said out loud. Step 5. Reinforce with review, not regret. Every night, take 5 minutes to check in. Not to judge, to align. Ask, did I act like the version I committed to today? Where did I lead? Where did I fold? What will I adjust, not out of guilt, but out of clarity? This is where identity gets cemented. When you observe, adjust, and recommit daily. Without this, you drift. With this, you stay aligned. Even if you miss something, even if you slipped, you're still in the game because you're watching yourself instead of abandoning yourself. That's how real growth sticks. Not in the big wins, but in the small moments where you chose to stay aware and didn't lie to yourself about what's really happening. Bonus principle. Protect the beginning of your day like your life depends on it, because your direction does. Your morning is the most vulnerable time. It's when identity is either locked in or handed away to the world. So choose what you think, what you say, what you consume, what you allow. You don't need the perfect morning routine. You need one that reminds you, I've already decided who I am. And today, I live like it. That's your job now. To protect the version you've built. To stop giving it away with silence. To reinforce it with clarity, with behavior, and with structure. Because nobody's coming to do this for you. Nobody's going to reinforce your standards for you. This is you. This is leadership. This is identity in practice. And if you do this day after day, without skipping, without waiting for motivation, without making it emotional, you'll wake up one day and realize you haven't just become someone new. You've made it impossible to go back. And in the next step, I'll show you what to do when the reinforcement gets boring, when the structure starts to feel like repetition and you're tempted to let up just a little. That's where the real test begins. Let's keep going. It always comes. That moment when everything you're doing starts to feel routine, repetitive, empty. You show up, but there's no fire. You go through the motions, but it feels like you're just checking boxes. And a thought starts to creep in. Does this even matter anymore? This is the quiet test. Not the breakdown, not the distraction, but the slow erosion of meaning behind the repetition. And if you don't understand what's happening here, you'll mistake consistency for stagnation. You'll call discipline burnout, and you'll start negotiating again. Let's get something straight. Reinforcement isn't always exciting. It's supposed to be grounding. It's not meant to give you adrenaline. It's meant to give you direction. But if you confuse repetition with irrelevance, you'll destroy the very habits that are building the new you, just because they no longer feel urgent. That's when people quit. Not because it was too hard, but because it got too quiet. They expected every day to feel inspiring. They expected the structure to deliver emotion. And when it didn't, they thought something was wrong. But nothing's wrong. In fact, that's when you know it's working. Because it means your system is holding. You're no longer chasing motivation. You're living by design. Still, let's be honest. It's hard to keep showing up when the reward isn't instant. When the high is gone. When no one notices. When nothing new is happening. When your efforts feel invisible. So here's what you do when that feeling hits. Step 1. Reconnect with your why, but deeper this time. In the beginning, your reason was emotional. You were in pain. You were tired of your old patterns. You want to change now. But now that you're past the crisis, you need a vision, not just a reaction. Ask yourself, who am I doing this for when no one's watching? What kind of person am I building for the version of me 10 years from now? What does my life look like if I stop reinforcing this today? Get specific. Get visual. Get honest. Because the repetition becomes sacred when the purpose becomes clear again. Step 2. Rotate the form, not the foundation. You don't have to do the exact same method forever. You can change how you reinforce your identity, but you can't stop reinforcing it. Example, if journaling feels dry, try voice notes. If reading affirmations feels empty, rewrite them with new language. If your routine feels stale, change the environment, not the principle. Reinvention keeps your identity fresh, but only if it protects the core behavior, not avoids it. Step 3. Accept boredom as a marker of mastery. The best performers in the world, athletes, artists, leaders, don't chase novelty. They chase consistency. They train the same moves. They study the same plays. They drill the same language. Why? Because the basics aren't basic. They're foundational. And repetition without applause is what separates the average from the elite. So when boredom shows up, say this to yourself. This feeling means I'm building something permanent. Because if it's still exciting every time, you're probably still new at it. Step 4. Track impact over time, not emotion in the moment. Sometimes, you won't feel the impact of your actions until weeks or months later. The reinforcement you do today might not show up until life throws a curveball. That's when you'll notice. I didn't break. I didn't panic. I didn't go back. Because your structure was there. Your identity had a spine. You were ready. That's why you reinforce even when it feels pointless. Because one day it won't be. Step 5. Add weight, not chaos. If the routine feels light, you don't need to abandon it. You might just need to challenge yourself a little more. In alignment, not volume. Ask, where am I coasting? What standard have I been hitting easily? What would stretch me again, without overwhelming me? Growth doesn't always mean doing more. Sometimes, it means doing what you're already doing, but with more presence, more detail, more intention. Step 6. Return to identity, always. Every time the structure feels stale, come back to this. I'm not doing this for the feeling. I'm doing this because this is who I said I'd be. That sentence, said out loud, every day, will hold you when nothing else does. Because eventually, that becomes the reward. Knowing you're someone who follows through. Someone who leads themselves. Someone who doesn't need noise, applause, or fire to stay locked in. That's what self-leadership is. Not motivation, but consistency, on purpose. So if you're feeling the weight of the routine right now, if you're tempted to change everything, to skip, to recalibrate, don't. Hold the line. Adjust the angle, not the direction. Because this version of you, it's still worth protecting, especially when it's quiet. In the next step, we'll talk about what happens when the world around you no longer supports the identity you're reinforcing, and how to keep your standards high even when your environment tries to pull you back. You're close. Now's not the time to blink. Let's go. You've done the work. You've rebuilt your routine. You're showing up with consistency. But now, the world starts testing you. And not in obvious ways. It's subtle. It's passive. It's disguised as normal life. The people closest to you start making little comments. Oh, you're doing that again. You've changed a lot lately. Relax, it's just one day off. You go to environments that no longer match your mindset. You hear conversations that drain your energy. You're surrounded by habits you've outgrown. And suddenly, the version of you that felt strong in solitude starts to feel fragile in the world. This is where most people fold, not because they're weak, but because they thought discipline was only about themselves. They forgot one thing. You don't just have to lead yourself. You have to lead yourself inside an environment that's trying to lead you back. Here's the truth. If you don't deliberately reinforce your identity, the world will do it for you. And it won't reinforce the new you. It'll reinforce the convenient you, the quiet you, the one that fits in, the one that doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. Because people don't want to lose the version of you that made them feel safe, even if that version was killing you. So when you start rising, they start resisting. Not always intentionally. Sometimes it's subtle, a tone, a joke, a glance. But the message is clear. Come back to who you were. You're easier to deal with that way. You have to be ready for that. You have to expect it. Because it's not personal, it's predictable. And your job isn't to convince them. It's to protect yourself from becoming available for who you used to be, just because it's socially easier. Let me say it clearly. If your environment doesn't match your identity, your standards have to be stronger than your surroundings. So how do you do that? Step 1. Build invisible walls. No, you don't cut everyone off. You don't isolate. You create mental boundaries. You decide what version of you gets to show up and where. And if a space doesn't support that version, you walk into it armored. Not defensive, just clear. You walk in knowing, I'm not here to get approval. I'm here to stay aligned. That mindset protects you from needing validation. And when you don't need validation, you don't shape-shift. Step 2. Use your standards as filters, not negotiations. Your standards aren't open for discussion. They're not goals. They're rules you've chosen for yourself, because you know what happens when you drop them. So when someone says, just skip the gym this once, just eat this, it's a celebration, just take a break, you deserve it. You don't argue. You don't defend. You calmly say, that's not aligned with who I'm becoming. And that's it. Because the more you explain your evolution to people who haven't made theirs yet, the more you'll start second-guessing it. Step 3. Protect your input like your identity depends on it. Because it does. What are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you feeding your mind when no one's around? If your environment is noisy, then your inputs must be intentional. This means being surgical with what enters your head. Unfollow people who normalize mediocrity. Pause conversations that reinforce your old habits. Stop giving your attention to messages that contradict your direction. You don't need more willpower. You need less interference. Step 4. Have a personal comeback ritual. Because no matter how strong you are, some days you'll absorb the energy around you. You'll feel off. You'll start thinking thoughts that aren't even yours. You'll catch yourself shrinking again. When that happens, don't panic. Just reset. Go somewhere quiet. Reread your standards. Say them out loud. Move your body. Do something physical to reconnect with your identity. That ritual, repeated on hard days, will save you because it brings you back home, to yourself, to the version that's not available for compromise anymore. Step 5. Audit your spaces regularly. Not just your schedule, your spaces. Ask, where do I feel the most like myself? Where do I shrink? Where do I over-explain? Where do I forget who I'm becoming? When you find those places, adjust. Redesign them. Limit exposure. Create buffers. Because you can't expect to feel powerful in places where you've only ever survived. Step 6. Remember that leadership is lonely, but not forever. In the beginning, protecting your identity will feel like isolation. But over time, it becomes elevation. Because when you reinforce your standards long enough, the wrong people fall off, the right ones show up, and your environment starts to reflect your identity instead of resisting it. But that shift only happens if you stay long enough to see it. Most people cave before the alignment comes. Don't. Hold your line, even when you're the only one holding it. Because you didn't rebuild your life just to hand it back for the sake of harmony. You didn't fight to become someone new just to perform like the old you in familiar places. You're not here to keep everyone comfortable. You're here to stay aligned with the truth you paid a high price to find. In the final step, I'll show you how to lock all of this in, not as a temporary phase, but as a permanent identity standard. How to finish what you started, and never become available again for the person you used to be. We end strong. Let's go. This is the part where most people take their foot off the gas. They feel better. They feel stronger. The old patterns are quiet. The new habits are working. They're no longer in survival mode. And that's exactly when it happens. They relax. They ease up. They stop reinforcing what made them strong. And without even realizing it, they begin to return. Not because they chose to fall, but because they stopped choosing to stand. So let me say this clearly. Your new self isn't permanent. It's a decision you keep making. Every single day. And if you stop making that decision, you don't just pause your progress. You start undoing it. Because the version of you that got here, that showed up when it was hard, that built when no one noticed, that said no to everything pulling you back, that version doesn't survive without reinforcement. This is what separates those who change once from those who never go back again, the ones who hold the line, even when the motivation fades, even when no one's watching, even when everything in their environment wants them to drop it. They don't stay strong by accident. They stay strong because they built systems that protect their identity. They reinforce themselves before the world has a chance to pull at them. They lock in their standards so tightly that anything less feels foreign. That's the level you're stepping into now. Not because you're better than anyone, but because you've tasted what happens when you stop choosing yourself. And you're not willing to go back there anymore. You've outgrown pretending. You've outgrown compromising. You've outgrown that quiet self-betrayal that comes from saying you want change, but not reinforcing it. Now you lead, and not with volume, not with force, but with discipline, with alignment, with clarity. You've built too much to hand it back. You've walked too far to turn around. You've paid too high a price to forget who you are. So make it permanent, not through perfection, but through standards, not through pressure, but through rhythm, not through emotion, but through identity. This is the moment where you stop calling this a phase, where you stop calling this a comeback, where you stop flirting with your old self like it's an option. It's not. You're no longer available for that version. Not in private, not in public, not in silence, not for a second. And when life gets heavy, because it will, when the voices get loud, because they will, when everything you built starts to feel ordinary, because it will, you don't panic. You don't regress. You don't rewrite the story. You reinforce. You hold your ground. You remember why you started. You say to yourself, out loud if necessary, I didn't come this far to lose myself now. I'm not slipping. I'm not breaking. I'm not going back. You reinforce the identity you fought to create. Because it's not about having better habits. It's about becoming unavailable for anything that violates your new standard. So if this video didn't just remind you of what's at stake, but reminded you of what you've already built, if it brought you back to yourself, If it made something inside of you wake up and say, "I'm not losing this again," then subscribe now, not just to this channel, but to your own leadership, your own rhythm, your own identity, because we're not here to experiment with growth. We're here to live inside it. And this space, it's not for people who need more tips. It's for those who already decided and just needed one voice to say, "You're not alone. You're not wrong. You're not too intense. You're just finally living like the version of you that doesn't disappear." Hold that version. Reinforce it. Protect it. Because once you realize who you're becoming, you stop apologizing for who you used to be. Let that be your new standard.